Well, hey there, campers, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Camp Cryptid. I'm your host, Erica Fett, and I want to thank everyone so much for hanging out for the last episode, the part 2 to my look into ghost ships, diving into stories like the legend of the Octavius, the MV Joyita, the HMS Terror, and many other strange incidents out on the ocean. There are many, many more unsolved mysteries the ocean holds in regards to ghost ships. But for now, we are going to explore another side of nature back on land, one also shrouded in mystery, folklore, and mythology, the Ohio Grassman. Now, much like the Bigfoot and the Sasquatch of North America, the Ohio Grassman is a similar bipedal ape-like creature, but it resides in the grassy marshes of Ohio. Essentially, the Grassman is Ohio's Bigfoot. Now, when it comes to Ohio, I gotta say, Ohio is a straight up mix between Children of the Corn with the cornfields and then the viral Hell is Real billboard sign, and it gives those types of vibes for sure. But then the other side of it is that it's full of haunted attractions and tons of cryptids. Literally some of the most haunted locations like Mansfield Reformatory and the Franklin Castle to the strange and unexplained Serpent Mound. And then you've got the cryptids and creatures on top of that. You've got Bessie from the Great Lakes to the Crosswick Monster and the Defiance Werewolf, the Loveland Frogman, sightings of the Mothman, the Melon Heads of Kirtland, and it's safe to say Ohio is for horror lovers. But the Grassman is essentially Ohio's variant of Bigfoot. As far as what it looks like, it's still basically the same idea as Bigfoot. Around 7 to 9 feet tall, covered in hair, ape-like. But one big difference from Bigfoot is that supposedly the Grassman is a bit more aggressive and territorial than Bigfoot. And instead of residing deep within the forest, the Grassman is located mostly in marshes and grasslands, or off in the brush of fields. Now, some sightings of the Grassman even attribute it to being in packs versus the solitude that Bigfoot is usually associated with. Now, native tribes to Ohio, like the Shawnee, referred to the Grassman as the guardian and protector of nature within the forest, respecting it but also keeping a distance. And more sightings of wild men-like creatures in nature started to roll in over the 19th century, almost 100 years before the hype and hysteria of the Bigfoot with the Patterson-Gimlin film. Now, in 1886, a newspaper article titled The Wild Man of Ohio, published by the Bryan Press, which is close to where I'm from, reported an incident where a group of hunters encountered a wild man-like creature. Well, it was man or beast or some sort of strange creature that appeared to have the physique of a man, but covered in matted hair, and it was located in the hills of Holmes County. Now, the group of hunters said that the creature walked upright, but when it saw them, it chased toward them, letting out a guttural sound. Now, as the hunters ran off, they turned around once they got to higher ground to fire off some warning shots. And what they saw truly was bizarre. The creature got on all fours and jumped into the water and swam off, disappearing once it reached the brush. Now, almost 10 years later after that, in 1897, around the Mount Vernon area, it was reported that a giant 8-foot man-like creature stalked the area around the village of Danville. It was said that the creature carried a child that was walking to school almost a half a mile before dropping it off unharmed. The village people said that the creature was at least 8 feet tall, covered in long hair, and it ran faster than horses. But even in 1904, a newspaper out of Pennsylvania called the Weekly Courier reported that a small town in Ohio called New Philadelphia was being terrorized by a giant hairy creature that walked without clothing and frightened the locals. As the locals went to capture the creature, they were too afraid to get too close, and they observed the creature grabbing a handful of grass, stuffing it into its mouth, chomping it down before it ran off. Now, in my earlier days of my Bigfoot research, there was a story I found that was a bit more of an urban legend, and it was of a Bigfoot-like creature that was roaming the Cedar Creek bog area. Now, rumors of howls and people seeing a large, hairy, Bigfoot-like creature Roaming the woods and the roads outside of the bog led to a lot of excitement. Now, the legend was that a group of teens went to go camp there in the Cedar Creek bog area. But after they didn't return home, it was suggested that they were taken by the Ohio Grassman, or whatever large, hairy creature was roaming the Cedar Creek bog area. Supposedly, this story is also why a large tall fence was placed around the bog, to keep what was ever in that bog roaming secure. But I scoured the internet and newspapers for any reports of any missing teens in the area, and I couldn't find a single thing, so this is a story we'll just chalk up to a story, right? But aside from the legends and stories passed around, numerous reports of wild man-like creatures living in the wilderness piled in from the late 1800s to the mid-1900s. Reports of giant man-like creatures, half covered in hair or fully covered in hair, kept the people who lived around the grasslands and forested areas on their toes and alert. In the 1970s, a sighting of the Ohio Grassman, known more popularly as the Minerva monster, became one of the most prominent grassman sightings of modern day. This incident was where a family's property was repeatedly visited by a hairy, giant, ape-like creature over the course of months. Now, numerous people describe this creature not only as being giant and hairy, but they estimated that it could weigh up to 500 pounds. They found traces of giant footprints by a local gravel pit, and they observed this creature foraging for food, but they never interacted beyond that. While the Grassman is known for being aggressive, this Minerva monster never gave signs of aggression and never attacked any of the locals. But this sighting added to the lore of the Ohio Grassman and the overwhelming amount of sightings of ape-like human creatures that have rolled in over the centuries. Now, the question is, are these sightings of wild men or of the Ohio Grassman just wild, unkempt men living off the land away from civilization? Or are they actually some sort of creature like Bigfoot that remains elusive and mysterious and hidden away from humans? Either way, both of these possibilities are quite scary when you think about them. It's also worth noting that a lot of these earlier sightings around the 1800s and on were in the same region of Salt Fork Park area where a lot of modern-day Bigfoot sightings are occurring. Now, not too long ago for a Campfire Tales episode, there was a story submitted about the feeling of being watched while in Salt Fork Park, as well as a deep howl heard in the distance. Now, Salt Fork is also where the Bigfoot conference is held, and what better spot to hold it than there, right? So being from Northwest Ohio, more towards Michigan and Indiana, there were always stories of a Bigfoot bias. Now, when I talked about starting my podcast, my mom told me stories about Eden, Ohio, where a Bigfoot was spotted years before. Like I said, in so many episodes describing Ohio, yes, it's absolutely full of corn, but there are so many forested areas and high brush fields and cave systems scattered all over the state. So while I've never seen Bigfoot in Northwest Ohio, or even now around Central Ohio, I will say there is an eeriness to the forest here at night. I stare into the woods at night and I hear strange sounds coming from down by the water by my house. And whether it's as simple as it's raccoons or deer or coyotes, my mind often does wander to the question of whether it's an ape-like creature like the Grassman, and could it really exist? Or worse, what if it's a human detached from civilization and humanity that's just out there roaming? You know, just normal everyday thoughts a human should have, right? But to further the idea that some of these sightings of the wild man-like creatures may indeed have been men that are living out in the wilderness, it wouldn't have been strange for something back in that time period of the 1800s to the early 1900s. The idea of Western exploration, the avoidance of the government, being self-sustainable with growing crops and raising livestock, or even just the fact that back then, the neglect of those with mental illness or mental problems and the lack of proper care facilities for those people, or just the overall knowledge of how to take care of these people, these were all contributing factors that could have left people living off the grid back then. and what could have also contributed to more of these grassman stories. Now, I won't pretend that every single sighting of the grassman is explainable with the random man living off the grid theory, but it could definitely explain some of these sightings. Now, there is also the idea that it's misidentification of other species. Now, even in my neighborhood in Central Ohio, my neighbor actually told me not too long ago, this past week, that 10 years ago, there was actually a bear that came to our neighborhood. So misidentification of other animals could have happened back then. Especially if you think that we're now in, this would have been 10 years ago. Think back to the 1800s to the mid-1900s. It's definitely a possibility. But with all that being said, it doesn't explain every single occurrence that happened over centuries. One thing I do want to add is that while Ohio has forests and wetlands, marshes and swamps, one thing it also does have a lot of are caverns. All over the entire state are cavern systems that stay pretty well insulated all year round, nice enough for people to live in them all year. So there is that little tidbit of information as well. And I also want to add that while most people associate Bigfoot and Sasquatch to the Pacific Northwest, Ohio is around fourth for the most Bigfoot sightings in the United States, which may be surprising for some, but as someone from Ohio who knows just how diverse the environment is here, it doesn't surprise me at all. Now, speaking of that, in high school, my friends and I would go around the backcountry roads looking for abandoned houses to explore. And sometimes on these back roads, you would go miles and miles without seeing a home, just fields and forests. And I was from a little village with a population of less than 2,000, and it was pretty much in the middle of nowhere. You literally had to drive an hour just to get to a mall. Awful, just awful, I know. So when you think about Ohio, yes, it's got some amazing cities like Cleveland and Cincinnati and Columbus, but outside of these cities, it's full of forests, ghost towns, and fields that stretch for miles and miles. So yeah, the Ohio Grassman, a legend I don't know if we will ever have solid evidence for or solid proof for, because whatever is out there living off the grid knows the landscape and surroundings way better than we do. And it's not distracted from the wilderness like we as humans are with technology. I go around walking sometimes down trails and hiking, and half the time I am watching the scenery and I am looking at the forest, but the other half of the time I'm looking down at my phone at whatever Pokemon just popped up on Pokemon Go. So it would be easy to miss something that's that camouflaged in the forest. And I can't tell you how many times I have deer in my backyard that are laying down and just chilling, and people walk by and they don't even realize it. So imagine that this is a creature that wants to stay hidden and off the grid. People are probably going to miss it. So what I'm saying is this creature has all the time in the world to watch us and know how to evade us, which is why I don't want to say it's got a leg up on us, but in my opinion, it definitely has an advantage. But yeah, the Ohio Grassman, Ohio's Bigfoot, is one of my favorite of all the Ohio cryptids. The next time you're in Ohio hiking around, just keep an eye out for this big guy. Now, I did mention ghost towns earlier in the episode, and Ohio does have its fair share of ghost towns. So y'all already know that it's on my list for future episodes. So now, as far as the next few episodes for this month, I've got patrons voting right now on the episode for the end of the month. And right now, I think the three that are winning are Mysteries of the Amazon, The Beast of Exmoor, and Kentucky Goblins. So if you're on the Camp Cryptid Patreon, make sure to go vote right now because we got to figure that out. Now, other than that, I have been watching Rings of Power. It's amazing. I'm obsessed. I love it. I have also been keeping up with my Only Murders in the Building every week because I grew up watching Steve Martin and Martin Short. So I love them and I have to keep watching them. And it's just a fun little like murder mystery show. And I love the entire cast. It's amazing. So yeah. Also, this weekend, if you're at Horror Hound Cincinnati, the convention for horror and all things good and spooky, I will be there this Friday walking around. So make sure to say hi if you see me. I'm going to be carrying some cute little Camp Cryptid stickers. So if you see me, say hi, get your sticker. Now, other than that, I've been pretty boring lately. I have to apologize. Other than doing my Ohio Grassman episode and catching up on Rings of Power, super boring. I apologize. But also, it's been kind of nice to relax and enjoy the beginning of fall, right? So, with that being said, please have an amazing rest of your week. I hope wherever you are in this world, you're having a good week and you're getting lots of food to fill those beautiful little bellies. And yeah, I want to say thanks again for being here and blessing me with this spooky, amazing little community. You all rock my socks forever. So, yeah, until next time, take care.